Podcasting, the macabre frontier. These are your ghost stories, your encounters, your bumps in the night. The cold chill runs up your spine. Beyond the known reality is to BOOdly Pod. I bid you ghoulings. I am your spiritly host, Daniel Floyd, and welcome to the first annual To BOOdly Pod Halloween special. We have 5 fantastic ghost stories coming your way, 1 by me and 4 by all of you. So make sure your door is locked, make sure the shade is pulled down tight, and all the lights are on. So Scotty, set phasers on kill. Engage.
As some of you know, I used to be in and operate a paranormal group called The Other Side of Life. So you can probably imagine that I would have a lot of spooky little stories throughout those investigations that I could share. And we did have quite a few creepy experiences in some of the investigations that we did. Most of it came in audio form, but we did have some personal experiences that maybe someday we'll come back on and sort of review or relive or rehash or share those stories with everybody. But the one I want to share today for To BOOdly Pod is something that happened to me when I was younger, when I was in high school. Now, we all have to take or had to take gym class in school, and I was no different. Now, I am far from being an athlete, although I do or did love to play sports. So I enjoyed gym class, and at one point we were playing basketball in gym class, and I had turned around to set up for a rebound, and my knee blew out, so I collapsed to the floor. Long story short, I was dislocated my kneecap, so I was unable to go down the steps to my bedroom in my house for the next, I forget how long, month or so. In that time, I would sleep on our couch in the living room. And there was one night I was laying there, everybody else was asleep, my mother and my sister, and my father was still at work since he worked second shift. And I was laying there, I had just shut off the TV, was trying to go to sleep, kind of sort of probably in that half mode where you're kind of asleep, but kind of not asleep. You're aware of everything around you. And out of the corner of my eye, I see somebody walking towards me. Now, I didn't turn to look because I just assumed it was my mother or my sister. And this woman, completely solid like a normal living human being, she had gray hair and a nightgown on, and she leaned over and patted me on the head and said, "Poor boy, you'll feel better soon." I was kind of stunned because I knew it wasn't my mother, so I kind of jerked up and around, and the minute I did that, she simply vanished. I was freaked out, to say the least. I sat there and I thought about waking up my mother and sister, but I kind of got my wits about myself. I knew my father would be home soon, and there was no way I was going to go back to sleep anytime soon. Well, probably about an hour or so later, he came home. So I hobbled out to the kitchen and told him about my story. Now, in my family, my mother is the sort of uptight skeptic about everything. She thinks everything is as it appears to be. And my father was more of the believer in the fantastic. So I was kind of shocked when he said, "Are you sure you weren't asleep?" I was like, "No, I could actually feel her hand on my head." Well, we talked for a few more minutes about it, and I hobbled back to the couch and eventually went back to sleep. Now, before I finish the story, let me sort of give you the climax or the backstory that ties everything together. In my house, before I was born, my grandmother had lived there. She passed away before I was even born, so I never knew my grandmother. Flash forward to the morning after the incident, I was telling the story to my sister and mother, and as expected, my mother kind of passed it off as me having a dream. It was sort of dropped and forgotten about at that point, since neither I nor anyone else had seen anything else from that point on in the house. Sometime later, we were going through some old photo albums, and my sister was flipping through there, and I seen this picture of this old lady, and I stuck my finger down. I goes, "Who is that?" And my sister's like, "Well, that's Grandma." I got cold chills because I was stunned, and I looked at all of them. I said, "That is the woman that put her hand on my head and said everything was going to be okay." I'm not really sure if they believed me or not, but for my own sake, I can honestly say that that was the woman that put her hand on my head. And as I stated, I never knew my grandmother. She died before I was born. So it has to be one of two things. I saw the ghostly spirit of my grandmother comforting me, or somehow subconsciously she entered my dream state and gave me the same comfort. Either way, it's both frightening and comforting all at the same time. All right, so joining me now is my buddy Rob. In a few years, how long ago was it?
7 years.
Yeah. So 7 years ago, him and I went on a paranormal investigation together. It's kind of the end of the road for me, the beginning of the road for him, and he's going to tell us all about it right now.
Okay, well, I worked at a school in Muskegon, and had a lot of stuff happen, and so I contacted Dan because I seen on Facebook that he had been doing ghost hunting. Didn't know that he was almost done with ghost hunting, but contacted him, and he joined me on my first ghost investigation at my school. And I'll let Dan tell you what some of the things we got.
No, see, this is my podcast. This is where you talk. Why did you want us to go do that?
Because I wanted you to show me the ropes for ghost hunting.
Well, what were you experiencing at that school?
I had a lot of audio stuff happen. I seen a floating apparition. Let's see, I was touched, and basically just had a lot of doors shaking and stuff like that. So I figured, hey, maybe we can get some EVPs and stuff. So we had Dan and this couple of friends come, and we did that, and got a few things on evidence, a couple of EVPs, and possibly a rock thrown, but we're not too sure about that. So.
Well, speaking of that, had you ever heard or experienced anyone like hearing a rock being thrown or something being thrown in the hallway?
Never.
So you're just saying Matt was
No, I'm not saying that. That's just something you can't prove,
but what exactly, I know you've always been interested in the paranormal, but what drew you to want to investigate it? Just interest?
Yes, just interest to try to figure out what was going on. Worked at a couple schools before too that I've had some things happen, audio and visual stuff. So just working at this school, it started happening quite a bit. So I just figured see if we could capture it.
So in your investigation since then, you have one specific one you'd like to share while you're here?
Yeah, there's one I had at another Muskegon school, and I don't think I've even told you about it, but it was during summer, probably 6 years ago. It wasn't too far after we did ours, but I worked for Muskegon, so I met my buddy over at another school, and this was in the summer, so it was probably about 4:30 in the afternoon, 5 o'clock. So went over and hung out with him a little bit because he had to work a little bit later because he went to college. So we got out at 3:30, and he got out at like 5:30 or 6:30. So I was at a school on the lakeshore, went up to the third floor, and the weirdest thing is, I mean, I did bring like a cassette recorder just to record, see if I got any EVPs, but we ran into this kind of the static electricity ball that was in a hallway on the third floor. It was about not as big as a basketball, but kind of like not as big as a beach ball, but smaller in a basketball. And it had this static electricity, and we just kind of bumped into it, and we both put our hands in it, and this went on like 10, 15 minutes. It was weird. And you put your hand in it, and the static electricity would go up your arm, go all the way up your neck, top of your head, and it'd dissipate. And then you keep your hand in it, and it would start all over, go up. And it just kept doing that. And it just kept going. We just kind of had to give up on it because it kept doing it. So, and my friend who was with me, all of a sudden he disappears, and I'm like looking all over the school for him. And I guess he just couldn't handle it because he came out of the basement, and he's like, "Yeah, I just took a shower." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? We just went in this thing, whatever it was, static electricity." And he just like never talked about it again. I don't know if it just like melted his brain and he just couldn't handle it.
That tends to happen a lot with people that have experiences.
I think he was in like denial and just said, "Okay, that didn't happen." So, but I think that's one of the most peculiar things. I don't think I even told you about that before. But
no, you hadn't.
Yeah, I got it on a video cassette that you can listen to, but I wish I would have had like an EMF detector. But it was
VHS.
Yeah.
Sorry,
audio cassette. Sorry, not VHS.
Old, digital tape.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Rob. Anything else you'd like to share about any future investigations you have coming up, or are you just kind of in limbo?
I'm in limbo now. We've got some investigations, some other groups that coming up in October and stuff, but they're kind of, some of them are out of state, and I'm back to school, so it's kind of hard to take days off because they're going to be during like Thursday, Fridays, and stuff like that. So.
This next one comes from my friend and listener, Jenny, and she writes, "I guess I could tell you the most recent occurrence. It actually begins about 5 years ago. I pulled into work and saw a shadow figure in the window. When I went inside, the only other person there who walked past the shadow in the window on her way into the building said she heard footsteps in the room that I saw the figure in the window. Over the past 5 years, we've had automatic dispensers go off randomly, but within the last 3 months, we've had an uptick in the activity. It started with one of my guys' lunch boxes flying off the table onto the floor. There was nobody but him near it, and he has limited use of his arms. He would not have been able to reach it from where he was. A very important letter to someone's parent went missing from the shelf where we kept the notebooks. Several people, including myself, tore the whole bookshelf apart, like taking stuff off the shelf, tearing it apart, looking for this letter, and we couldn't find it. A week later, I found it lying on the bottom of the shelf on top of a few magazines as if it had been there the whole time. A few days later, the garbage can lid slid across the floor. About 2 weeks after that, my coworkers said the garbage can lid started swinging back and forth on its own. The last incident happened just 2 weeks ago. Myself and my 3 staff members were sitting in our room. One of my guys, Mike, is a wanderer, and we're always calling or chasing him back into the room. He was standing over by the now infamous garbage can. In my peripheral vision, I saw a person in a similar colored shirt as Mike walk right past me. So I started calling out to him, "Michael, come back here." As I'm saying this, I see he is still across the room by the garbage can. Right before I said it, myself and one other coworker heard a footstep, while another heard a doorknob jiggle. There hasn't been anything since that day, though. I've always been sensitive to the spirit world, and for about a year I studied how to become more tuned in, working towards being a medium. I'm an empath. Most messages come through as emotion, but from time to time I will hear and see things. Unfortunately, I had to stop my studies for stupid reasons. A few of my family members have also had these abilities, but none of them have explored them like I have. My whole life I have encountered ghostly things. One of my favorite stories is from when I was a kid. My brother and I were spending the night at my aunt and uncle's house, which was known to be haunted. My brother and I were about 5 and 8. I'm the older one. Our half-brother had been in a bad car accident in Buffalo, so while my parents were there, we spent the night in our cousin's room, which was the most active room in the house. At one point, I woke up and looked over to the door, and it was wide open. I knew the door was shut when we went to sleep, but the door was completely open. So I look over at it, and in the doorway was a tall, thin man, another shadow figure, just standing there. I laid back down because my first thought was my uncle, but then I remembered he was shorter and heavier. When I looked back at the door, he was gone. I don't know how much later it was. I couldn't sleep because I was freaked out. I guess my brother was awake too, but he didn't say anything because he thought I was asleep and didn't want to wake me up. Anyway, I started seeing what looked like fireworks, little teeny tiny explosions of silver fireworks above my head. I closed my eyes, covered my head, and eventually I fell back to sleep. The next morning I was talking to my brother about the incident. He never saw the man, but he saw the fireworks. Wow, that is a fantastic couple of stories you shared, Jenny. Thank you very much for sharing your ghost stories with all of us here on BOOdly Pod. And I'm joined now on BOOdly Pod so he can share his story. Noted author, magician, comedian, husband, father, public safety officer, president of the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones fan club, and anything else I missed, Bill?
Minister, wedding officiant, and most importantly, probably for this episode, skeptic.
Yeah, well, see, I'm playing your role on this new podcast I'm doing. I'm being the skeptical guy on all the conspiracy theories, but we're not talking about that today because you, Mr. WC/Bill Hoffman, would like to share a ghost story for BOOdly Pod. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. This actually comes from my line of work, where I am a law enforcement officer, and if you reach across the page, you'll find a lot of times cops and firefighters and EMTs. They always, we have our fair share of encounters with the other side of life, if you will, and many times, unfortunately, it's people transitioning in front of us. So this actual story happened 1 week to the day after I lost I'll just say a patient, okay? And I'm not going to go into details of that, but it was in the same building. And what's important about this building is it's already creepy as hell, man. Even if nothing ever happened here. So this building was constructed before Michigan was even a state. Now it's been renovated a couple times, but it's still got that gothic old feel to it. You know, it's just one of those places where you walk in and you go, oh, this place is for sure haunted. And so we lost someone in that building a week ago before this happened. And now this building was empty at the time. Okay, it wasn't being used at this time of the year, and I had gone there for a property check. And I'm walking through, and the reason we do a property check on this particular building is it's got a lot of artifacts in it, and it's got a lot of expensive artwork, and it's just stuff like that we check up on. So, one of the things in this building that's like that is we have a piano in one of the lounges that is valued at over $3 million. When you look at the piano, it's super nice. You can tell it's old. It's got like gold inlays, and if you could guess what a $3 million piano looks like, it probably looked like this, right?
Wow.
So we walk by. They don't let anyone play it. They have like velvet ropes up over it. They do special concerts. You can still play it and stuff, but not just anyone can sit down and touch this thing, right? Well, in this lounge also. Now, when I say lounge, it's probably the size of a basketball court. So it's a relatively big. Okay. But in this lounge, they have the piano, and then on the other, up against the other wall, they have a gigantic grandfather clock, probably 8-9 feet tall. And this thing chimes every 15 minutes. And every 15 minutes, it plays that song that we've all heard. It goes, so
Right.
that random grandfather clock song, right? And then it does that every 15 minutes. And the only difference is on the hour, it'll then chime what time it is. Bing, bing, like that. So if it's 2, it rings twice, right? So I'm walking through, and what happens a lot of times, that damn clock will go off and make you jump, right? Because they go, and then you just realize it is what it is. So I happen to be walking through, and I remember it was 1:15 a.m. and the clock went off. Boom, boom. Okay. Played the song, and no big deal. And so I finished checking the area, and I'm getting ready. I walk down this marble hallway. At this point, I am probably 40 yards. Okay, so 40 yards down this hall. So it's a big building, in 120 feet or whatnot. And I'm checking on another door just to make sure the door is locked. And I hear the piano playing. Again, I am supposed to be the only person in this building. I hear the piano playing, and it's playing the grandfather clock song. And it's not the grandfather clock. I know the difference between a grandfather clock's bells and a piano, and it is playing that same song. Right. So I turn around and I'm like, crap, I'm supposed to be the only one in here. I radio into dispatch that I'll be checking on something, and I don't ask for backup or anything like that because it's just someone in the building. So I turn around, I walk 40 yards and back into that lounge. No one's there. Nothing's disturbed. The bench on the piano hasn't moved. It's not a player piano. It doesn't do it on its own. So I'm like, oh, okay. Well, this lounge has like 3 different doors, but they all lead to like one hallway. So I go out one of the exits, figuring the person heard me coming and ran. So I hustle my butt through one of the hallways into like the gathering area, where if they had ran out of the building, they would have gone that way, and nothing was out of place. I'm like, oh, I'll have to check the cameras. We have camera systems on every door. We don't have them on the hallways and whatnot, or in the lounge. That would have been great. But coming in or out of doors. So I radio to another officer and have them get on the cameras. And so they get on the cameras, and they tell me, no one has left since you walked in. So I'm like, okay, so that means this person is hiding in the building. We search the building from top to bottom, which doesn't take that long. 15 minutes. It's not a huge building. I guess there's nooks and crannies, and that's what I figured what happened, right? I guess there's nooks and crannies where someone could have popped into a closet or something and hid there until we were gone. But we never did find who played that piano. Now, here's the important thing that ties this all, not ties it all together, but makes me as a skeptic says, yeah, well, someone obviously played the piano, mocked that, heard me coming, ran away, and did. But here's the thing. I finished the call, and I look at my watch, and it's now 3 a.m. And I go back, like, oh, geez, I wasn't on the call that long. And I check my phone, right? And my phone tells me, it's like 1:55. So it was the time it really was. So, my watch was just messed up, was just bumped off. And then something told me to look at the clock. I looked at the grandfather clock, and it matched my watch.
Wow.
And I can't explain any of that. I have no explanation for how the time changed on the clock, or how the time changed on my watch. My watch was not digital. It was a wind watch, So, who played the piano? I don't know. Who changed the time on the clock? I don't know. Who changed the time on my watch? I don't know. What happened? I really just don't know. But every time I go back into that building, I hurry my ass up and get out of there quickly.
Can't say I blame you.
Yeah, so that's really my story. And coming from, is it supernatural? Is it coincidence? Is it anything? I can't tell you. I know when I walked through that lounge the first time, the clock went off at 1:15. So I know the clock was right then.
Well, I know
it wasn't like daylight savings or nothing. None of the stuff comes into play.
Right.
None of that.
Well, I know, knowing you as a thorough individual and a skeptic, after you guys walked through to check all the rooms and everything, you went back and checked the cameras again to make sure nobody left while you were checking the building out, right?
Yeah, so basically what we did was we had that building on lockdown, because there's only two, actually there's 3 entrances or exits out of that building. They're all camera. So someone could jump out like a first floor ground window if they went into the one of the ones that lined out the window. That is a possibility. So you can get, it wasn't like, super, super crazy security to get out of the building. Getting in would be difficult. Or there's a good chance they hung out there throughout the rest of the night to when the building reopened at whatever, 9 o'clock in the morning. And then they just exited with normal day traffic. We would never really know.
Right.
It'd be hard to find out. So, the building closed at like 9 p.m. and we don't have anyone entering the building on camera other than officers, because we can check it a couple times a night. Other than officers, we didn't have anyone entering the building through a door between the time that the building closed and the time that I had my incident.
Hey, you never know. Well, I appreciate you sharing it here on BOOdly Pod, and everybody listening should go check out and buy W.C. Hoffman's books on Amazon and wherever it is you get your books, and check out his comedy, the Dad Bod Comedy Tour, right?
You got it. Yep, dadbodcomedy.com, or just search W.C. Hoffman on Amazon. I write action adventure thrillers.
And I was also remiss in saying he's also a fellow podcaster, so check out Hoffman's Hunting Heritage. Where is that available anyways?
Hoffman's Hunting Heritage is available anywhere you download podcasts from. So, and also as well as Facebook video, as well as YouTube. So if you're in an office setting and you can't use your phone, but you can get to YouTube, you can listen to it there.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, Bill. Thank you for sharing your story.
No problem. I look forward to listening to this episode so that I can debunk everyone else's stories. All right. Have a good day.
You too. And this next story comes from my friend Kelly, and I cannot thank her enough for sharing it with all of us. To make an impossibly long story short, my mother had a very hard life. She often expressed her desire to be reincarnated into something that couldn't be hurt or abused. Her vision was to be a monarch butterfly, Monarchs were her spirit animal. Well, insect, I guess. In the mid-2000s, she became deathly ill with cancer. I went to her house and took care of her every day until the day before she died. The morning she passed, my sister called and said, "You need to get down here." I said, "Not until they take her away." When my ex and I finally arrived, my stepfather had set up a nice cookout in the backyard, and my brothers and sisters were there with their families. I grabbed a beer and went outside. My brother was the only one who appreciated what I did for my mom, along with my stepdad, but brother is significant. He talked to me for a little while, and soon I felt a little overwhelmed and said I needed to use the bathroom. I took a little while in there to gather myself, then went back outside. My brother's eyes were wide as saucers. He said, "Look down and move slowly." I looked down at the lawn, and a tiny monarch butterfly was nestled in the grass. It had to be half the size of a normal butterfly. I looked back to him and said, "It landed right after you left and stayed until you came back." After a few minutes, the new butterfly flew away. I'm sure that was my mother telling me she would be okay. A couple of footnotes. About 4 or 5 months after she died, I took a bunch of her clothes to Goodwill. As I closed the trunk, a huge monarch butterfly literally dive-bombed me, scared the crap out of me. Mom was mad I was giving her things away. Then, a few years later, after I moved to Oregon, my stepfather got very sick and was in the hospital. I quickly flew over to see him. Each room in intensive care had a soothing lit panel with a picture of an animal or plant rather than a room number. When I arrived at his room, I was stunned. His panel was a monarch butterfly. Mom was looking after him. Wow, that is a fantastic story, and I cannot thank Kelly enough for sharing it here on BOOdly Pod.
And that's going to wrap up the first annual BOOdly Pod Halloween Ghost Stories special. Did you hide under the covers? I'd like to thank Rob, Jenny, Bill, and Kelly for their fantastic stories. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter at BOOdly Pod, and don't forget to subscribe to future podcasts. As usual, I don't have a closer to this podcast, so I'll simply say, they're here. WLLP Spock Rock Radio.